quite interesting. But also, hopefully I can speak about the microphone initially. And so yes, as you've heard, I'm going to be talking about this to work, Eurasian Jays and how they know what women want. So I work in the comparative cognition group in Cambridge University in the psychology department. And we work with corvids, so these are all types of birds in the crow family. In particular, I work with Eurasian Jays, and we've come up with some experiments that seem to show they know what women want. Now, I find it very difficult to know what women want. My girlfriend will probably vouch for that, and I'm sure all of you will have some experience of trying to find a present for your partner and really struggling to get something decent. Eurasian Jays seem to be able to do this, but we'll talk about this in a bit more detail. But as I say, humans struggle to figure out what their partners want, and it's thought by a lot of researchers that only humans are able to understand that what they want can be different to what someone else wants. And humans struggle with this so much so that Hollywood has created a movie about this, and this is where I need to run with a microphone, which might fail abysmally. There you go.
Was God's gift to women. Here, I see an extra coat. Tell her Grande. Grande? Oh, at least I like to think so. Thanks. But he's about to discover. Let me get your cab, sir. Thank you. You're welcome, my little sweet darlings. What did you say?
Okay, so in the film, Mel Gibson has to dress up in women's clothes and be electrocuted to understand what women want. In fact, he can hear what women are thinking. Now, obviously we don't electrocute Eurasian Jays dressing up in women's clothes. Yeah, I'll do that. But to give you a little bit of background, I want to compare Mel Gibson and Eurasian Jays. It's a standard comparison that we do. And so, what do we know about Eurasian Jays? And what do we know about Mel Gibson? Well, are they territorial? I know from a lot of films about Mel Gibson, he is territorial, as emphasised by Braveheart. Eurasian Jays are also territorial. Although they don't fight over countries and they don't group together, they fight over individual territories, which are a lot smaller than Scotland. Are they monogamous? Well, Eurasian Jays, on the other hand, do partner for life. And so, I don't know if that's better or not than Mel Gibson, but anyway. Most importantly for this talk is the courtship behaviour. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get any information about Mel Gibson's courtship behaviour. I did actually try and get in contact with his secretary, but she put the phone down on me when I asked. We do know a lot about Eurasian Jays' courtship behaviour. In particular, they share food with each other. And this allows us to run the tests of figuring out if they know what their partner wants. And so they place food in their partner's beaks during breeding season, which happens in the springtime. And just to give you an idea of what it looks like, this next is a slide. Should I play? Maybe? So it's very attractive to Eurasian Jays, but not maybe so attractive for you guys. And this cements their relationship. But it also gives us an ability to try and test how good they are at knowing what their partner wants. Because just as you might be able to figure out if your partner's any good at knowing what you want by seeing if he's going to give you a decent present or not, we can figure out if a male in this situation gives a female the food that she wants. But of course, figuring out if your partner gives you the correct present is very easy. In humans, I can just ask you, has he given you what you wanted? And you can say yes or no. With Eurasian Jays, we have to be a little bit more inventive. And we have to, instead of asking the female what she wants or what she wanted, we have to manipulate what she wants instead. And to do that, we use a phenomenon called specific satiety. Now, most of you will be familiar with this phenomenon, although you might not know it, and it goes like this. A apologies for continuing Mel Gibson, but if I show you one Mel Gibson movie, you might just about be happy to watch a second Mel Gibson movie. But if I gave you a third and a fourth Mel Gibson movie to watch, you'd be really sick of Mel Gibson, and I'd have to apologise. And when I gave you a choice between watching yet another Mel Gibson movie or a movie with Scarlett Johansson in it, well, it's easy to know what you're going to choose. And the same sort of thing happens with food, and again, you've probably almost all experienced this. You've eaten a really, really large main course, and then you're totally full, and then someone comes along with dessert, and you've somehow made some space for dessert. And Eurasian Jays do this as well. Obviously, they don't do it with main courses and desserts. Instead, they do it with worms, or it works with worms. And Eurasian Jays like two different types of worms, what we give them. In particular, they like wax worms, which are white and juicy, and mealworms, which are brown and crunchy. And so, to manipulate the female's desire, we feed her lots of these wax worms. They look slightly off in this image, but anyway, so we feed her lots of wax worms and give her a choice between eating the more wax worms or the mealworms. And surprise, surprise, she chooses to eat the mealworms, one that she hasn't been full of. And this allows us to manipulate what she wants. So we then allow the male to watch her eat all of those wax worms, and so we've placed them in two different compartments with a small window in between them. The male can watch the female eat lots of one type of worm, and then he gets an opportunity to share. So initially, we have a transparent barrier in the window, so the male can't share with the female. We then whip the transparent barrier out, whip the food out of the female's compartment, and let them share through the window. And again, to give you more videos of birds sharing food, it works a little bit like this. Although they struggle in this case. But finally they get a worm. And because of a specific society, we can manipulate it so that in one case the female wants mealworms, and in the other case she wants waxworms. And surprisingly, the male is actually able to respond to this. He does exactly what the female wants. He gives her mealworms when she's eating waxworms, and waxworms when she's eating mealworms, which I'm told is much better than most boyfriends would do. But anyway. The question we then have is, how do the Jays know what their partner wants? And there's a couple of options that we wanted to test out. Now, again, a comparison with Mel Gibson. In the movie, Mel Gibson was psychic. Now, we didn't really seriously consider that Jays were psychic or telepathic, but let's just throw that one out there. And more importantly, there's this element of communication. Now, obviously, humans can communicate. We've got language. It's nice and easy to communicate with each other. Jays don't have a language, or at least doesn't seem to have language, but they can still somehow communicate what they want, or it's possible to. Now, if I offered you some broccoli, and I saw you wrinkle your nose and pull off any face, it would suggest to me that you probably don't want any broccoli, but I should offer you something else. The female Jays might be doing exactly this when the male tries to give her a food that she doesn't want. And we wanted to see if this was what she was doing. And to do this, we reran the experiment. And so we reran the experiment, but instead of having the transparent barrier where the male could see what the female was eating, we put in an opaque barrier. And so the female ate out of sight of the male. So the male didn't know what she'd eaten. But if the female could make some kind of indication about what she wanted, then the male should be able to share the appropriate food. And he did. Oh, he didn't, sorry. He was absolutely useless at this. He had no idea what to share with the female, so he's back to being the standard boyfriend. So this suggests that there's no communication between the Jays. There's no indication of what the female wants during the sharing phase. And so we know that Mel Gibson was communicating with psychic. The Jays don't communicate, they don't indicate what they want during the sharing phase. And of course, I'm sorry to say, for anyone who was sort of really hoping that the Jays were psychic, they're not. But this leaves us with a slightly curious question of how are they actually responding to what the female wants? And it seems to be that males are able to project from their own experience what the female wants. So they know that when they've eaten lots of waxworms, they want mealworms. and they manage to sort of step into the female's shoes and predict that that's what she wants to eat in the same scenario, which is quite a highly sophisticated ability. And sort of as a last warning note, it's better to think like a Eurasian Jay and try and imagine what your partner wants rather than try and electrocute yourself using a hair dryer in a bath. That's not so good. But thank you to everyone for that.